Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, it's a week after Easter. Can you believe it? And we're into week number 4 of the lockdown. I know some of you by now are probably at that point where you're chewing the carpets or chewing the curtains or licking the walls or licking the TV or something. You're just going out of your minds with boredom. Some of you will have started classes online and digitally today. And just count yourselves lucky that you can. There are millions across the country who don't have the capacity or the facilities to be able to do that. And they're going to be set back quite a lot thanks to this lockdown and COVID-19. So count yourselves fortunate. But that said, let's pick up our discussion on fear. And we've been working through this whole thing of those fears, the what ifs that we sometimes have, those things that keep us afraid and keep us scared. And remember, last week being Easter, we dealt with the fear of death. And that for us as followers of Jesus, believers in Jesus, people who have relationship with Him, we don't really have anything to fear when it comes to death, because we know that our lives are only about this big and this long in the grand scheme of things. Because after this life, we have a life that goes on forever in eternity with Jesus if we believe in Him and have a relationship with Him. This week, I want to talk about those kinds of circumstantial fears that come up in our lives. And we're going to look at one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and it's a story of Jesus walking on the water. Who of you have ever tried to walk on water? Every time I get near a swimming pool and I'm going swimming in a swimming pool, I try. It's the first thing I do. It's how I get into the pool is I try to walk on water. One of these days I'm going to surprise myself and actually do it, but to date I manage 1, maybe 2 steps at most, and then I sink right to the bottom. But Jesus walks on the water. I'm sure some of you know the story, but if you don't, Jesus has just fed 4,000 people. And He puts the disciples into a boat. He says to them, go across the other side of the lake. I'll get you there. I'm just going to dismiss the people. He dismisses the people. He then goes up mountainside to spend some time by himself with God. Very important. And it's about 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. The disciples are out in the middle of the lake again. And the wind comes up and the waves come up. And the wind is against them, the waves are against them. The wind and the waves are trying to push them back to the shore that they left from, and they are doing everything. They are struggling against the wind and the waves to get to the other side. Things just do not seem to be going their way. And Jesus, having spent his time with God, comes down the mountain and walks on the water. And he seems to be going to overtake them. Mark's gospel, and we can read it in Mark chapter 6, verses 45 to 56, tells us that Jesus actually meant to pass them by. Now, we don't know why he meant to pass them by. Mark just tells us that he did. But anyway, the disciples are struggling with, the wind and the waves and everything, and Jesus comes just kind of taking a stroll. And the disciples see him walking on the water, and the Bible records that they were terrified. They thought it was a ghost. Okay? You see somebody walking on water, what are you going to be thinking? And they were terrified. And Jesus, hearing them cry out, seeing their fear, goes, hey guys, chillax. It's me. It's Jesus. And Peter, my favorite disciple, because, well, before Pentecost, I can relate to Peter quite a lot. I'm working on relating to Peter after Pentecost, but before Pentecost, I can relate to Peter. He's the kind of guy that goes, I'm going to say it, I'm going to do it, and that's it. And here he goes, Jesus, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water, and I'll come. Not thinking. Now, what's Jesus going to say? Jesus isn't going to go, it's not me. So he says, come. And Peter gets out of the boat, and he starts walking across the water to Jesus. And all 3 stories, in Matthew, Mark, and John, tell us that Peter was doing quite well. And then he noticed the wind and the waves, and he started to sink. Okay, so what's the point here? He starts to sink. He cries out, Lord, help me. Jesus comes across, grabs him by the hand, lifts him up, And together they go walking back across the water into the boat, get in the boat, and the boat goes across the other side. Done deal, story's over and done with. Okay, so what's the point in the story? The thing is sometimes we will be doing everything we can to get to our destination, to get to our goal, to achieve what it is that we have set out to achieve. But it just seems like everything in life is against us. No matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, it seems like everything is against us. And Jesus he may not be in our situations with us, but he is in the area of our situations. He was on the lake. And sometimes Jesus will come to you in that situation, in that circumstance that you're in a way that you don't immediately recognize, in a way that maybe even scares you a little bit. The way that it scared the disciples. They at first didn't recognize him. They thought he was a ghost. But here he comes, and he approaches them in a way that they didn't recognize him, and that scared them. But when they do, when Jesus says, "Hey guys, it's me," what does Peter do? Peter gets out of the boat. And this is a thing. The waves were still tossing. The wind was still blowing. The circumstance, the situation was still as it was. But Peter says, "Jesus, if it is you, let me come to you." And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter climbs out of that boat. And the thing that's interesting to note is that while Peter had his focus kept on Jesus, he was able to walk on the water, walk through the waves, walk through the wind. But the Bible tells us that Jesus took his eyes off of Jesus and he noticed the wind and the waves. Sometimes we will notice those things that are stopping us, we'll notice those things that seem to be going against us when everything that we're doing isn't working. And we take our eyes off of Jesus. And we have now gotten out of that boat. We've now gotten out of everything that we can do. And we're right in the middle of the situation. And we take our eyes off of Jesus. And what happens? We start to sink. Because up until that point, our eyes have been so focused on Jesus that nothing else has mattered. And so right now we're in an uncertain time. The wind and the waves were an uncertainty for the disciples. And we're in an uncertain time. Yes, we may go into 2 more weeks of lockdown. We may not. What is going to happen after COVID? How are we going to do this? What is going to happen? There is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of fear around us. And the key is to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. But what happens when we don't? What happens when we notice the circumstances and the situations around us? What happens? What do we do when we sink? Well, like Peter, we cry out. We go, "Jesus, help me." And it's interesting. Jesus was right there, and he reached down immediately and grabbed Peter. He didn't say to Peter, "Hey, dude, you were the idiot that climbed out of the boat. Swim!" No. He was right there. And we can be assured, we can be guaranteed that when we cry out, when we get swept up by the circumstances and the situation, and we say, "Jesus, help me," Jesus will be there to help us. But is Jesus going to calm the waves? Is Jesus going to calm the wind? No. What is Jesus going to do? He is going to walk with us through the wind and the waves, through our situation, through our circumstance, to a place of sure footing again. And when we get to the place of sure footing, the boat, in the disciples' case, he's going to be with us in that place of sure footing, and he is going to make sure that we get to our destination, as the story tells us he did with the disciples. Now the interesting thing is he finishes, when he gets into the boat with the disciples, he goes, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why did you doubt? That's how Matthew tells us. That's what Matthew tells us. He says to Peter, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And sometimes we have those doubts in our circumstances and situations. but we're not meant to. It's not a bad thing to doubt. But when we doubt, just call out, reach out to Jesus, and let Him take you by the hand. And so as we go into the rest of this week, maybe you have doubts, maybe you have fears, maybe you have questions about everything that is going on with the lockdown and with COVID and with your schoolwork and with family and whatever. Maybe you looking at the circumstance and the situation and you're kind of going, I don't know. And you're starting to sink instead of swim, instead of walking through the situation and on the situation. Well, can I encourage you this week, when you feel that anxiety, when you feel that fear, when you feel all of that, can I just encourage you, cry out to Jesus. Cry out to Him. Let Him grab you by the hand and walk with you to more stable footing. Have a good week, guys, and I hope we'll chat this through on the group. God bless.